cloud. Attendance, close that. All right, so we have a file to download today. We've worked with this data before, but today we're going to be making a form on that data. So we'll go ahead and get that workbook open, and you may remember this data. So this is like data from like an outdoor store, like some kind of sporting goods store or something. So if we look here, we've got a hunting department. The category is waterfowl, manufacturer, flambeau, and it's $60 for an 18-inch mallard. I guess that's probably a decoy that you would kind of put out on the lake. Make your spread even more visible to those high-flying flocks with these large Magnum decoys. So, in case Magnum wasn't enough to let you know it was large, these are large Magnum decoys. And so what we're trying to do today is we're saying we're going to try to help by keeping this data updated. It turns out this is not a bad way to store this data. We've got a row for each product. Each column has the same kind of information. So, all the names are right here. But when it comes time for me to update this particular one, my 18-inch mallard, when it comes time to update this, when I'm working on just this one record, Excel's not that great of an interface for it. And the reason is that like everything that's not highlighted right now on the screen is irrelevant to the task at hand. The task at hand is update this one product. And so I can't even see it's not that much information, but I can't even see it all on one screen because there's so much other information that's like irrelevant to this particular task. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to say, I'd like to do something that brings all this information from this one product onto a screen so I can just look at that one product and maybe even do some kind of data validation, because one of the problems here is that Excel will kind of take anything. We can make data validation. Yeah, I guess we could do a pretty good job with the data validation tools that are in Excel. But and to do that, to bring it all into one area, we're going to create what's referred to as a user form, sometimes referred to in other environments just as a form. And let's go ahead and see how that works. So I'm going to come in here to my Visual Basic Editor. And we have a module in here already. Oh yeah, this is kind of where we left off. I'm not sure I'm not sure how close this is, but we had this thing that would make lists. So it's like we've got some data similar to what we worked with before. This is not the example we did in class. This is from some semesters before. But so far, all the modules that we have used have been general modules. They've just been insert a module, and it's a module that just holds code. And a module is the only place where we can put VBA code that will get saved with the workbook. I mean, we can put VBA code in the immediate window, but close the workbook, that's gone. So code that I want to stick around has to be in a module. And we're going to create a different kind of module now. So what we're going to do is we're going to do insert, but instead of inserting a module, we're going to insert a user form. When we say insert a user form, then we're going to get this here. And in fact, I think I'm going to not, okay, I usually work with my development environment maximized, but this user form is going to be kind of small. We want it a little bit bigger than this, but not much bigger. You can kind of change the size here. And instead of having this maximized, I'm going to restore these windows here. So now I've got this module here, which I'll close. I don't need that old module. But I've got this user form here, and I'm just going to kind of bring my window down to be about the size of the user form. It's a little bit weird because it's like a form inside a form. But now if I look right up here in my Project Explorer, this is like view the code for this form or view the form for this form. So if I click on that one, it should bring up the code module that is built into the user form. So when I created that user form, it gives me a graphical way to be able to see what I'm building, but it also gives me a place to put code that goes along with this form. So there's a module built into this form. It's not a general module. It won't show my list of other modules. I have to get it by coming in to edit this particular form. And so we're going to work with these kind of two environments as we develop this form. And the idea here is that we can use a user form to essentially make a much more sophisticated dialog box. So there are a few dialog boxes that kind of come built into VBA. Message box just puts up a message, and then input box lets me type something in and collect one piece of information. But if I want to collect a bunch of information at once and let the user kind of have that open and work with it, that's going to be creating a user form. There's a question in the back. The question is, how did I open up the module? And the answer, there's several ways to get there, but the answer is I just, by clicking on these two buttons here, you kind of go back and forth between the code for the form and the visual part of the form. But if you just double click on the form, it'll bring up the code as well. And in fact, it's like, oh, you probably want a sub procedure here, and it gives us a sub procedure here. And these sub procedures now are going to be a little bit more sophisticated than the ones we've worked with so far. But let's go ahead and let's get started and kind of understand how those sub procedures are. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to come to our toolbox. Now that toolbox may not be showing for you by default and you won't ever see it unless your user form here is active here in development mode. But I'm going to come up here to my toolbar. Let me zoom in a bit on this. So I'm going to come up here to my toolbar, and I'm going to say, I want some way to be able to show that toolbox that gives me the things I need to be able to put stuff onto my form. And the one that opens the toolbox is this one right here. It's a little hammer with a wrench, and to me that looks vaguely communist. I'm always a little bit nervous to click on that, but click on that, and that will open up then that somewhere. It'll open up the toolbox. What's that? Okay, so I didn't quite catch that, but we're going to move on, I think so. All right, so this toolbox has these controls. Now, controls is a strange word for this. What these are objects. Controls are just visual objects that you can put onto a form. That's what a control is. I refer to them so long as controls, it sounds normal to me. But I remember when I first was learning this, it was like, that's a weird word to call them, controls. I guess it's because it allows you to control data input and stuff. Anyway, that's the word. They're objects. They're visual objects. The first one actually is a tool that just says, don't unselect any other object. But let's start off with this one right here. So this one here is called a command button. And there's a couple of different buttons. There's an option button. There's a thing called a toggle button. We want this command button. And I'm just going to click on that tool, and then on my user form, I'm going to click and drag to draw that button in here. And so that creates this control. It is an object. Every control has a name, and that name is going to be really important if we're doing anything with that control that's going to affect our code. And because we're actually going to make this button respond automatically when the user clicks on it to run some code, we want to make sure that we've named this button with a meaningful name. Command button 1, the default name, is a really bad name. So if your properties window isn't showing, just choose View Properties, and that'll bring that properties window open. And then these are all in alphabetical order except name. Name shows at the very top. And so I'm going to change that to, this is going to be like the save button. So I'm going to call it CMD save. Now, this is just like a convention that you don't have to put CMD in front of it, but it will be helpful because as you get more and more controls on it, when you're looking in your code, it's really nice to be able to look at the reference to that object and be able to know, okay, that's a command button. I don't care that you use CMD for the beginning of your command buttons. You could use BTN if you wanted to, or you could put button. That's, as long as you're consistent with the way that you do it, it's fine. But it is really helpful to have the name signal to you something about what kind of object it is. Now, remember, objects have properties. And here's a bunch of the properties that we can change the value of. Now, you can see this one here called caption. it's command button 1. Caption is what shows on the face of the button. So if I change command button 1 to say save, then that'll just change the way that appears. So remember, that's what a property is. A property is some value that describes something about the way the object is. And let me do one other thing here. I'm going to set the default property of this to be true. By setting the default property to true, that says, listen, if the user's working on this form and they press enter, that will be equivalent to the user clicking on this button. This is the default button. User presses enter, it's just the same as clicking on this button. Okay? Ooh, so far so good. Let's go ahead and put some code behind this button. So I'm gonna double click the button. And that will not only take me to my code module, but it will also generate a sub-procedure for me to work on. And this sub-procedure is, the name of this sub-procedure is really important. Because unlike every other sub-procedure that we've worked on before, every other sub-procedure that we have made, or function procedure that we have made, we have had to expressly call it. We've had to say, go and run that sub-procedure, either by attaching it to a button or going into our code and running it or putting it to a hotkey or something. We had something to say, go ahead and run it. Now, this is what's referred to as an event sub-procedure. So we have a new idea, and that idea is called an event. Events are things that happen in Excel. And so in this case, the event that we're looking for is we're looking for the event called click. So when the click event happens to this button, that is going to automatically make this procedure run. The user doesn't have to go say, run this procedure. It's going to happen automatically when this object, CMD save, receives this event click. And it is literally the fact that it is named that way, name of an object, underscore, name of an event, that causes this code to run automatically. So it's a naming convention that will make this work. So let's go ahead and put some code on this to actually make it close the form. I'm just going to say unload, and then I'll put the name of the object. Now, the name of the object is this form. I haven't even given this form a name, so it's probably called form 1 at the moment, or user form 1. But there's a little shortcut, ME. So when I say ME inside of a form, it's saying, oh, whatever form holds this module. You're familiar with this workbook. We talked about like this workbook. What does this workbook identify? It identifies a particular workbook. Which workbook does this workbook refer to? Well, yeah, this workbook, but it's the workbook that has the code. Like it's running a line of code. Whatever workbook has that code, that's what this workbook is. Me on a form is whichever refers to the form that has the code on it. And so wherever this line of code happens to be, if that's in a form, me refers to that form. So, and that's because, I might want to change the name of this form. I don't have to go through all my code and update the code. Just got to change the name of the form. And so unload me will just unload that form. So let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to zoom out. And to run this form, either if I have the form selected or I have some code in the module from the form, if I click the play button, it'll just run that form. So here it is. It's not much of a form yet. I probably want to change the caption of the user form itself. But when I click that button will receive the event and it will trigger that code to be executed. So we're not saving anything yet. We're just unloading it. I'd like to do something else. I would like to do something to this form. Wow, where'd my form go? There it is. I'd like to do something on this form to really drive home the fact that this seems pretty normal. Okay, you click on the button and it just runs. But click is only one of more than a dozen different events that could happen to this button. And so if I'm over here in this sub-procedure, I now have these two drop-down boxes, which you've never really paid attention to before. They're there anytime we're editing a module. But this first drop-down box says, listen, you've got some objects that you can work with. General means this would be like, just you want to write a sub-procedure that's not tied to anything? We could say, great, select general here. Or you could say CMD save. That object now, that will say, hey, we're interested in writing code that automatically responds when this object receives an event. User form, that's the whole form itself. It says, oh, you must mean the click event. I could say, no, I don't mean the click event. I mean some other event. And that's what this list is for. This will show me all the different events that are available. Let me get rid of that user form click for now. And let me come back here to command save click. And let's just see when command save is selected up here, let's just see what events are available. So wow, drag, before drop or paste, click, double click, enter. What do you think enter is? A little louder. It's actually not hitting enter. It's actually when that button receives the focus. Oh boy, I'm not sure the idea of focus. You probably have reason to know this. Show me how comfortable you are with the idea of focus on the 0 to 5 scale. So a bunch of you are at 0. Okay. So the idea in window-based operating systems like Mac OS or Windows or like visual Linux environments, there's only, out of all the applications that might be running, and out of all the windows and places you can have active in any one application, there's only one place that has the focus. And the focus means if I type something from the keyboard, that's where those keystrokes are going to go. And so if I think about this in the context of Excel, like right now, that cell has the focus. There's millions and millions of cells on this worksheet. That one cell has the focus. If I start typing, that's the thing that's going to receive the keystrokes. And so it turns out this button can receive a keystroke as well. In fact, I'm going to put another button. I'm just going to copy this button. And instead of save, let's call this one cancel. Let me go ahead and name it. I will name this one CMD cancel. And the caption will be cancel. And it turns out, there's a property called cancel, which is analogous to default. If I set cancel to true, striking the escape key will be like clicking on that button. Okay, but now if I view this form, you can see that one of those has the focus. Like if I press the space bar, because you can see those dots around it, that's the object in this whole application. That is the object that's receiving input from the keyboard. And so let me run it again. And if I hit tab, you can see that it is the focus is going back and forth between those two buttons. And so if I was to choose over here, enter, and let me just do, just trying to think of what we could say. I'll just do this. What I'll do is I'm going to change the caption of the form. So me.caption equals now. What I'm doing is I'm just going to put in the caption of the form when CMD save receives the focus, I'm going to put the current time into the caption of the form. So we should be able to see that happen. Okay, so it has the focus. So that even though I haven't done anything to make that happen, it's received that. And if I tab away from it and then tab back to it, that's going to trigger that enter event. And we'll see it update that. So I'm going to hit tab and it updates the time that's in the caption of the form. And so like the important thing here to grasp is that I now have to think differently about what's going to cause the code that I'm writing on this form to execute. Now, instead of saying someone's going to run this code, I got to think in terms of the combination of when a particular object receives a particular event. Let's look at one more that I think will help drive this home. And why don't we, I guess we'll do this on the save button. That should be okay. Instead of click, I'm going to choose mouse move. What do you think causes this event? What's the condition that makes this object, this button, receive the mouse move event? If you're just guessing, what would you say? Go ahead. Yeah, it's actually not just hovering. It's like when the mouse moves even a single pixel while it's within the boundary of the button, it'll trigger this event. So if you run the mouse pointer across that, it'll trigger it once for every pixel that it bumps into as it goes across. So like trigger that event to happen, 50 or 60 times as it's going across the size of that button. Now, this next example is kind of fun, but I hope it will drive home this idea that it's when an object receives an event that this gets triggered. So let's do this. I'm going to change something about my button when this happens. So name of the button is CMD save dot, and there's a property called left. The left property is like it's like how many pixels from the left of the form does this button start? And so I'm going to set that to a new value. What is it going to be? Well, let me just do this. I'm going to set it to a random number. RND is the function inside of VBA that gives me a random number between 0 and 1. RND times me, this is the form, me dot inside width. So there's a width of the form, which is the outside width, but the form has a border. Not much of a border on this one. It's like 1 pixel wide. But the inside width is how much space we have on the inside. And so now, like, someone tell me what that is going to do. Like, looking at that code, what is that code going to do when the mouse moves over that button? Yeah, I see you gave me that. You gave me, that was American Sign Language for that, but give it to me in English. Yeah, it's going to change the left property of that button. It's going to say, hey, this starts somewhere different from the beginning of the form. So if I move my mouse over this button, nothing happens. But if I move my mouse over this one, then that object will receive that event and it will move. It's like I'm trying to get to it. Now, could I click on this? I got to be really careful. If it happens to move right under where the mouse is, I mean, it happened to move like into that place. And so, but as we look at that, we'll just kind of fill this out a little bit. That's a little dissatisfying because it's like moving off the screen. So I think what I want to do is, instead of multiplying that, like the whole space of that, let me stop my code. I'm going to subtract off the width of the button. So it'll only be able to go up to the right, but not hang off the edge of the page. Minus CMD save dot width. And while I'm at it, let's do something similar as well. Instead of just changing the left, let's change the top. Me inside height and minus the height of the button. So now it's not just going to move horizontally, but to a random place horizontally, but also to a random place vertically. So now it'll kind of move anywhere on the form. And because I've adjusted it not to have the whole inside width, it shouldn't actually go off the edge anywhere. Now, I'll just do one more thing. I'm going to write this. This is almost a little joke. I'm going to write this in code and figure out what, kind of tell me in English what this is going to do. CMD save dot width equals CMD width minus 2. All right, what is that going to add to what happens when this button receives that event. Yeah, it's going to get a little bit smaller each time. You won't notice it at first. Let's just see. Let's just see what's going to happen to Edna in accounts receivable when she'll be like, hey, I got to get to that button. And right about now, she goes, is that button getting, it is getting smaller. Got to get to it somehow. Oh no, I don't have much chance left. Can I trigger that button? Is there any way for me to invoke the code behind that button? How do I do it? Press enter because it's the default button. If I press enter, it's identical to clicking on the button. Let's do one more thing here so that I've learned that if I don't do this next part, I'll end up trying to click on that button later in class and we'll be like, oh yeah, that doesn't work. Let's say if the month of now equals 4 and the day of now equals what? 1, then do this. What did I just say? Yeah, that button will only express that behavior on April Fool's Day, and it will do it every year. April Fool's Day rolls around, that's how that button will behave on April Fool's Day. Okay, so now, am I triggering the mouse move event when I move the mouse over it? I am, but the code says, first, before I do anything else, check to see if it's April 1st. And if it is, it executes that code. If not, we just move on. Okay, so that is to drive home this idea that now on forms, we have to think in terms of object and event to be able to make code respond. All right, now what we'd like to do is like to make it so when this user form opens up, it actually shows the information from the active, like whatever line, whatever row has the active cell. So let's go ahead and make something to like build this to be able to show some data here. So let's look at a couple of other controls. I'll click on the toolbox button and bring my toolbox over. Let's look at this one. This one's called a label. A label is just where I put text that the user can't change. So this is, I can change this through code, but the user can't change this. And so I think what I'm going to do here is this will just be something for the, this will be something for the user to see. You go ahead and change the caption. This is going to be LBL. Let's just do this. Let's call this LBL ID. This will be the product ID. And I'd like to make this kind of look like a data field that the user is not allowed to edit. So instead of leaving that background gray, I'm going to change that background color to be a darker gray. Now, this is like things that are set up in the system. I can make this the same page at the same color as the active border or the same color as menu text. And depending how you have Windows all configured to show colors, this will show differently. Or I can just come to the palette and say, I don't care how Windows is configured. I want this to be kind of a dark gray. I'll make that a dark gray. So I just select the background color with my label selected. I selected the background color. And then I just selected this third gray down here. But I'm also going to put a border on it. So the border style, instead of none, I'm going to put single. And I don't know what the border color is. Border color, I'm going to go back to the palette for the border color, and I'll change that to be completely black. So now I've got that label. It says label 1 right now, but I'm going to change that so that when this form opens, it's going to pull the product number off that first column. Now let's also go ahead and put something in here that the user can change. And so the thing the user can change, text the user can change, is this next one called the text box. I'm going to bring that text box right in here, and we'll just make this the name of the product. So I'm going to name this one txt name. And we'll make it so that when this starts up, it's going to put those two things in. It's going to put the product ID and it's going to put the product name there. One the user will be able to see but not change. The other one the user is able to edit. Okay, we ready to move on? Any questions or anyone need help? Okay, so if I run this now, we'll be able to see that those controls are there, but they don't have any data in them yet because I've got to write code to bring that data onto these. So let me come back to my code module. And I'm going to choose one of these. Now, to make this code execute, I now have to think object and event. So which object should I be expecting to receive an event and which event? So I want this to happen when the user form first gets displayed. And so what object should I choose here? Yeah, the user form. Okay, so I've narrowed it down to the user form. And do I want this to happen when the user form receives the click event? Probably not. That'd be pretty bad. The user has to click on it to make it show something. So now, whoops, let me go back and choose the user form again. We'll delete that, I guess, after we get the right one. And then instead of click, I'll just drop that down. I'm going to let you peruse those events and see if you can figure out which event am I after. It's like if you see the one that you think maybe it's this one, just holler it out. We've already narrowed it down because it's not click. Activate's a pretty good one. What that will do is every time that form becomes active, when it becomes the active form, that will trigger. In fact, that would work for what we're doing today because the way we're setting this up, this form is going to be active and no other form is going to open. And when we close it, we're completely deleting it out of memory. However, it's possible for us to have two forms open at a time and will allow you to go back and forth between them. And as they go back and forth between those forms, it would receive the activate event each time. So activate would do for us, but there's going to be a better one for us that only happens the first time that form gets shown before it's dumped out of memory. Initialize, yeah, that's the one that we're after. And you could make activate. Activate would work for this context. That would be just fine. But let's go ahead and use initialize. So when the form gets initialized, then this code will execute. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my user form click. I don't need that one. And here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to be doing a lot of things with my active row. And so I think what I want to do is just make a variable, a module level variable that I can access from anywhere on this user form. And so let me come to the very top and let me just dim row as a long integer. And now when I get to my initialize down here, I'm going to put the value into that variable. So row equals, and how do I tell which row is the active row? I'll narrow it down for you. The property I'm after is called row. So it'll be something.row. In your experience in working with VBA so far, what object would I be able to refer to here to figure out which? Okay, so I could say, if I say active sheet, that's going to get me to what sheet is active. An active sheet does not have a row property because it's got 1.04 million rows. So there's not just one. So active sheet probably is close, but not quite there. Active cell, yeah. Active cell has a row property. Active cell.row. And then I could write all of my code to display the information right here in initialize. But I think just to keep things a little bit cleaner, I'd like to make another sub procedure here just called show data. I can imagine maybe there's going to be different ways for me to use this form that I'm going to want to have it show the data at different times than when it gets initialized. But for sure, when it gets initialized, I want to show the data. So why don't I make another sub procedure, which I'm going to call show data, and I'll just call it here, show data. sorry, no parentheses. Show data, and then I'm just going to create it right here, sub show data. Okay, so my initialize is going to say, figure out what the active cell is, remember that, and then show the data. So now I want to refer to this label. What did I call this label? LBL ID. So I'm going to say here, LBL ID equals, I want to look at, which sheet do I want to look at? It's going to be my sheet called products, but you'll see over here that it has like a code name of data. So data dot, that's the sheet, cells, row number, row, column number, 1 is where the product ID is, dot value. It'll be really similar for my txt name object. Whoops. This is the object I want to do the property caption. My text box is called txt name, and it doesn't have a caption property. It has a text property. And I think it's in column 6. I'll go check. Well, whatever it is, it's in column F. So let me just refer to it by letter. Okay. So now, when this form first gets loaded, the initialize event will happen to the user form object. It'll execute this, which sets the value of that module level variable, then calls show data, which is going to rely on that module level variable to pull the data off of the worksheet and put it into the caption. Remember, this is an assignment statement. Take what's on the right, put it in whatever on the left. So now when I run this, it should come up showing that data. It happened to be on product number 1000, and it's the dying rabbit screaming pup. Oh, that's terrible. Dying rabbit screaming pup. I'm sad now for the rest of the day. Okay, show me where you are and what we've done so far. 0 to 5. 4, 5, 5, 5, 3. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now is just get a little more experience with, I'm not sure how I got a form 2. Did you have 2 forms in here? Form 1 is one I'm after. I don't know how that happened. Remove this one. No. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is now just look at some other controls. The next one I would like to do is I would like to put on like the department that this product is in. And so my department, let's do the manufacturer next. So I think over here on my list sheet, do I have a list of manufacturers already? Yeah, my list of manufacturers is here in column E. And so I've got the data that I need right here in column E to be able to give the user to choose a manufacturer. You don't get to type in whatever you want for the manufacturer. It's got to be one of our existing manufacturers. And so the tool that we're going to use for this is this guy right here, which is a combo box. It's called a combo box because it's a combination of a list box, which we're going to see on next Monday, and a text box. So this has both properties of a list and a text. You can start typing to put it in, or you can choose it off the list. So I'll bring a combo box here. Maybe I'll put it over here. And I'm going to put a label. Let's go ahead and name this combo box. I'm going to call this CBO MFR. CBO MFR. This is the manufacturer's combo box. And in fact, I think I'm going to also put a caption on there for it. So let me go ahead and bring in, so I'm going to bring in another label. So my A tool here. And I'm going to just label that as manufacturer. Oops. I don't want to change the name, darn it. LBL MFR. And I would have been happy to leave that one unnamed because I am not going to refer to that through code at all. The caption, I definitely want to say manufacturer. And maybe I'll put it kind of over and under instead of left and right. Kind of oddly enough, I'm not sure why, this has a background color that's the same background color as the form. I think I'd rather change the background color to be transparent. So back style from opaque to transparent. And that way, even if it's kind of overhanging a little bit, it won't interrupt. The background will just be see-through. All right. Now, there's kind of two things I have to do here. The first thing is I've got to fill in the options for this combo box. What's the user going to be able to choose from? And then the second thing I'm going to do here is I have to say, now that we've got the options there, which one is actually selected here? Okay, so we come back to my show data. And here I will just put a comment, fill manufacturer list. So let's look at, see what methods we might have available to us. CBO MFR dot, oh, it's the first one, add item. And let me just, I'm going to hard code this value. Flambeau was the one that we saw earlier today. And what we're going to see is that that add item method is just going to put a choice into my list box. There's like one choice now, Flambeau. It's like the only choice. But instead of having that hard-coded, or instead of hard-coding my whole list, I want to read it off of my lists sheet. So that's in column E of my lists sheet. And so let's just make a loop. Declare a variable up here, dim r as long. And we're just going to do a loop we've done already kind of several times. Instead of just having this plugged in here, I'm going to say r equals 2 do and loop. Anytime I'm making a do loop, I like to put in a do events. So if the loop gets out of control, I don't have to reboot my machine or kill Excel. I better do something to change where r is. R equals r plus 1. And now, instead of adding that hard-coded, I'm going to say my sheet with a code name of lists, dot cells, row number r, column number, was it E? Dot value. Oh, I better give some way to get out of this loop. We'll do until this thing runs out of values. So now we're going to come in here, and this loop is just going to go right down through all of my manufacturers. Probably should sort that. So let me just go ahead and come to my data and hit sort. Continue with the selection. So now they'll go in alphabetically because it's just going to read them in that order. So if I run this now, I should get plenty of manufacturers to choose from. I think I can start typing here. And it shows me which one I'm headed towards. Now I'm ready to choose to actually mark the selected manufacturer. Okay, questions on getting that list filled in? Show me where you are, 0 to 5 on the list. 5, 5, 5, 5, 4. Okay. So now all I have to do is like set the value of that equal to the value that I want. So this is going to be really similar to how we pulled the value for the manufacturer here. Here's how we set the name of our item, but instead of txt name, now I'm looking at CBO MFR. Changing the text property of that to wherever the manufacturer is. I don't know where the manufacturer is. Come to my products. Manufacturer is in column D. So now, yeah, cut down calls. If I was to choose one from Flambeau and run that form. Actually, let's go ahead and make this so that we can run it from a keystroke. So let me come to my developer window, come to my list of macros, and come to options. Here's where I can assign a shortcut key to a macro that I've written from scratch. So I'll put a capital E in there for edit. And so now if I'm here and press Control-Shift-E, it should Control-Shift-E. See how well that works? Let me try that again. List of macros, options, Control-Shift-E. Oh, it's not my runner. Oh, yeah. What I have to do is I have to tell this to open the form. Oh. I can't just, I'm like, I got to run a macro, and I haven't actually made a macro yet. So my subrunner is just for development. So let me cancel that. Come back to module 1, and I'll put at the very top a sub called show form. And it's just going to show this form. I'm now going to refer to this form through code. So I probably want to make sure that I've got the form named that I want it to name it. Right now, my user form is named user form 1. That's a bad name. So I'm going to double click it to select it again. And I'm going to change the name of the form to FRM product. Let's just call it prod, FRM prod. Didn't like something. I'm really wishing I had saved Excel before that. Well, let's see what we covered. Here's the version. Macros have been blocked. That's fine. Let's go look at those macros. That doesn't look so good. Oh, wait, let's go to the user form. Forms, user form 1. Something's there. Yeah. Sad to say I've lost most of what we did. Someone following along, they could email me where we were. I can paste it in. Yeah, go ahead, right here. what I want you to do is just copy the module and send it to me in the email. Don't send the workbook, just copy the code from the module and email it to me. I'll get my email up. And you've got my address, just my first name, GOVE, at byu.edu. Thank you, Elijah. Copy. Okay, let me save this as. Close it. Enable macros. Okay. I was trying to name this form. So user form, I'm going to call this FRM prod. That looks better. Now, inside my module, general module, I'm creating a sub procedure called show form. And it's just going to open up that form. So refer to the form by its name, FRM prod, dot, and then there's a method called show. So now if I run this, just run this, it'll show the form. It should show the form. Oh, I may not have the, I need to get my combo box built in here again. I lost that as well. All right, combo box. I'll skip the label for now. Call it CBO MFR. See if it'll run. Make sure that it got named. CBO. Okay. Like I need to do a little bit of work on that loop. We've got 4 minutes. Can I at least get this form working? Okay, I'm not sure that we get much further than this today. So we'll pick up here. Next time we're together, I'm going to go ahead and get this back to where it was before it crashed, and we'll just pick up there when we continue on Monday. All right, folks, thanks for coming. Class dismissed. What's that? Oh. Something like that. Hello, my son. Come up. Yeah, I'll get this label on. Okay.